Hi there. I'm Liz Norell, and I teach political science at Chattanooga State, and I also teach in the Global Scholars Program. I'm excited to introduce you to our common read for this academic year, Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. So Isabel Wilkerson is a reporter by training. She is someone who has experienced a lot of the things that she writes about in her book. So her first book was about the Great Migration of Black people moving from the South to the North of the United States in the Jim Crow era, seeking out full citizenship and full rights. And so her first book was about that. This book that we're reading this year is about a system she defines as a caste system. So this, she says, is an artificial construction, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups on the basis of things that are not changeable. So things like race or gender. Traits that would be neutral in the abstract, but that are ascribed life and death meaning. So in her book, she's going to talk about what she calls the 8 pillars of caste. And this book, it's written as a narrative nonfiction, which means there are stories, and it's going to be not just a history book, but really an engaging read. It's one of the best written books in recent memory. So good that Oprah Winfrey says this is the book that all of humanity needs to read. But it's really predicated on this distillation of research, both historical, psychological, biological, to understand where our ideas of caste come from. And so some of that has to do with, you see there, the first one, divine will and the laws of nature. This has religious overtones. It has it has a storied past, some of these ideas. And then we go through and see how these play out in our country and in other countries as well. So as a historical writer, Isabel Wilkerson is very interested in finding links across different experiences. So she's going to talk about the Indian caste system that was largely brought over when Great Britain colonized India. And she'll talk a little bit about some of the ideas that we see that show up in Nazi Germany. Not suggesting that the United States is Nazi Germany, but just looking for how caste shows up in these different ways. We're going to work through this book together as a group over the course of this academic year. So there's 7 parts to the book, and that means that we're going to have 7 meetings, starting on the 22nd of September, when we'll talk about the sort of prologue, the man in the crowd, and chapters 1 to 3. This is about 35 pages. You should be able to get your book next week. Juan will tell you more about that, but we're just asking that you take a glance at the first 35 pages of the book before we get together on the 22nd. And then we'll proceed once a month through April with readings in sections. We'll meet virtually on these days. This is always a Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And until further notice, those will be virtual. There may be some point where we want to revisit that and think about meeting in person, but for now, we'll keep it virtual. There's also a Microsoft Teams group that we can add you to, where we can talk between meetings, we can share resources. We'll have links there to join the meetings and recordings afterwards. So if you want to be a part of that, you can send me an email or you can let Juan know, and we'll add you to that group. And the final thing I want to mention is that this was chosen as an Oprah Winfrey Book Club choice. And as part of that, Oprah Winfrey and Isabel Wilkerson go through the different pillars of caste from that section that I mentioned. And this is a podcast that's available on Apple Podcasts. Each episode is 30 minutes to an hour. And if you want to kind of work through that on your own, you're welcome to listen to that podcast as a supplement. There are lots of other great resources online. There's a reader's guide with some questions. But our conversations when we get together on these different days will just be opportunities for you to reflect on what you've learned and think about why this is meaningful to us. So I love book reading groups. I love book clubs. I love getting together to talk about something we're reading that feels meaningful to us. And I hope you'll all join us for these discussions as you're able so that we can better understand the underlying structure of our own society as well as others. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out. My name is Liz Norell, but my email address is elizabeth.norell, Norell, at chattanoogastate.edu. And I look forward to meeting you at one of our book discussion meetings. Have a great academic year.